Hi, I'm Mark Scarbrough, and this is the YouTube channel Cooking with Bruce and Mark. And this episode is part of a series Bruce and I are doing on a deep dig into, esoteric, crazy, unusual, different recipes. And mine today, for at least US citizens, is a crazy recipe. It's in this box. It's been in this box for days. In fact, 5 days at this point, until it's ready, and it's just now becoming ready. What's in here? Okay, here's the whole deal. I decided I was going to do a deep dig into gingerbread. I thought, I remember gingerbread from my childhood. I love gingerbread, yada, yada, yada. That sent me down several rabbit holes, and I ended up here at a Yorkshire quick bread baked product called Parkin. Parkin is the ultimate gingerbread. I cannot imagine anything finer than this if you like gingerbread. This has to ripen for several days before it gets right. I'll tell you why later. This involves some insane ingredients. But let me just tell you the story about this. Once I got off gingerbread and onto Parkin, I started making all sorts of Parkin recipes across the web. I found recipes in cookbooks. I found them on blogs. They failed. They failed. They failed. They failed. I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to be McCarthy and name names. But I swear, it was a set of failures over and over again about this dish, about Parkin. Two things I discovered. One is, over time, Parkin has been gingerbreadized. That is, it's gotten bigger, taller cake. It's gotten less sticky. There's an old tradition of using oats in the north, as they say, and wheat in the south. This should be a heavily oat dish. It got more and more wheated as time went on, allowing it to be a bigger and bigger cake. Part of the reason this is flat, as you'll see, it has a ton of oats in it, which is holding it down. And not just oats, but steel cut oats, which are holding it down. It's got that to it. I'm trying to pull this back from its gingerbreadization in the late 19th and early 20th century. I did a ton of historical research. I looked at old recipes. I looked at old descriptions of Parkin. And I think I got somewhere close to what this thing is supposed to be. Black treacle, bitter, spicy, gingery, sweet. It's utterly addictive. And it requires a bit of effort. So this is a deep dig into Parkin. We're going to go first to getting the dry ingredients ready. Okay, so now we're going to assemble the dry ingredients. That's the first step of this recipe. Usually, if you live in the UK, you can use medium oats. There is no such thing in North America. Believe me, I searched and searched and searched. The only way to get this thing right is to use steel cut oats. So buy steel cut oats, and you want to grind them down to the right consistency. This is 1.5 cups, but please don't go by the cups. Please weigh it. It's 280 grams of steel cut oats. So much more accurate. 1.5 cups, but 280 grams of steel cut oats. You put them in a food processor, and then you grind them. This is going to go for a while. I would guess 1 to 2 minutes. It's going to depend on the moisture content of the oats and how long they take to grind. I'm not looking for flour, as you'll see. Okay, so here goes. Okay, this is getting close. It's getting close to what I want. You'll notice that the oats are still pretty grainy. You'll notice that I see still lots of pieces of steel cut oats in this. They're not as big as they were. The way I always tell is when I start to get I've done this recipe a zillion times in the last few weeks, as you start to get oat dust around the inside of the canister, you're getting right. And as it's running, if you look down it to the center of it, and you can see around the blade some oat dust starting to build up like a fine flour, but just a little of it, you're getting very close. I'm gonna let this go just 30 seconds more, and then it'll be right. Okay, that's really about it. I have now ground these things down. Looking for a place to set this down. I'm ground these things down, but they're still chunky, they're still crunchy, there's still oats in there. No question about it. So I'm going to add this now to my other dry ingredients. And I have my flour in a bowl on a scale to tell you that I think the only way to do this right is to weigh it. There's 1 cup of all-purpose or plain flour in here, but for me, that's 130 grams. Hear that? For me? The great cookbook writer Alice Medrick taught Bruce and me something very important, and that is that in any cookbook published in the US, because we use volumes in the US, should explain how the cookbook writer dips and gets flour. Bruce and I have different ways of doing this. I put the measuring cup in the bag and then wipe it off against the side of the bag. This is not how Bruce does it. So for me, a cup of flour is 130 grams. That's super important. I'm going to add my ground steel cut oats to this. Excellent. And then to this, I'm going to add my spices generally and my leavening. Generally, these spices are ground ginger plus mixed spice, the great UK mixed spice variety. But I actually worked on this spice blend, and I want to give it to you just as it really is. So I have 2 teaspoons or 4 grams of ground ginger. That's a fair amount of ground ginger, but not nearly enough, as you'll see. And then here comes what I'm counting as my mixed spice, which is a teaspoon or 2 grams of ground cinnamon. And then my US people, you're gonna freak out, but a half a teaspoon of ground coriander. You may not be used to coriander in sweets. Trust me on this one. Unbelievable, slightly musky, very sophisticated. Half a teaspoon of salt and a 1/4 teaspoon of ground mace. Oh, as I put my thumb in it. And in it goes. And then this is the kicker, and this is what I want to kind of stop on and talk to you just a minute about. This is 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda. I have tried this many different ways, and you can use baking soda, or you can use 1.5 teaspoons or about 4 grams of baking powder. But I'm going to use soda because I like that denseness. All I have to do is mix these dry ingredients together and then get ready to make my wet ingredients. Okay, so now the wet ingredients. I've assembled my dry. Here they are, all ready to go, ready for the wet. And you'll notice that I've already got a saucepan here with my wet ingredients in it. This is a really rich, unbelievable mixture. What went in here is 7 tablespoons of butter. That's not a stick for US residents. That's 1 tablespoon shy of a stick. It's 100 grams. And then here we go, 55 grams of lard, or 3 tablespoons, a little heavy, 3 tablespoons of lard. This recipe would almost certainly have originally been made 100% with lard. Again, butter is expensive, especially in the north. I played with these ratios to get it 7 tablespoons or 100 grams of butter to 3 heavy tablespoons or 55 grams of lard to get it about right. This is lard Bruce, actually rendered from our own pigs. So yeah, we have lard around the house. Listen, if you want to go to 10 tablespoons of butter, it's not quite 155 grams of butter. It's about 145 grams of butter at that point. You can, but the lard adds a kind of rich, savory, crazy, meaty taste behind it, especially if you're using real lard. There's also in this pan went 3/4 of a cup or 130 grams of very loosely packed light brown sugar. So if you're going to use a volume measurement of 3/4 cup loosely packed light brown sugar, and then the 2 key ingredients. First, Lyle's golden syrup. You need this. This is available in most American supermarkets. Look at this. Don't you dare use dark corn syrup. You need to search out Lyle's golden syrup. You want a heavy 2 tablespoons or about 50 grams of this in the pan. And then this is the kicker. You want 3/4 of a cup or 270 grams of black treacle. Could you use molasses? Yes, you could. It's not as good. I promise you, it's not as good. This is the same manufacturer that makes Lyle's golden syrup. This is their black treacle. And it's really only this that will give you that bitter, look how thick it is. It barely moves. 270 grams, or about 3/4 cup. It's a little heavy, 3/4 cup of this will give you that texture. I have to tell you, I could find in rural New England where we live, I could find Lyle's golden syrup. I could not find black treacle anywhere. Maybe you can in larger cities. I ordered this from Amazon and got a case of 6 cans delivered, which I've almost gone through in testing these recipes. This is the key if you live in the US. And if you live in the UK or around the Commonwealth, this is very easy to find. In the US, this is tough to find. So you're gonna have to order it. You're gonna have to make a trip. You can use molasses. It's not gonna be as good. I promise you, it will not be as good. Okay, so you take all that, you put it in a pan, you set it over extremely low heat. The one thing you do not want to do is boil this. We're not making candy, so please don't boil this. Put it on extremely low heat, stir and stir until that butter and lard are almost fully melted. When a little butter's left, take it off the heat and just keep stirring. Set it aside, cool for 5 minutes, and it's ready to go into the dry ingredients. Don't let this in this pan boil. Again, we're not candy making. We're trying to make a thick, rich, buttery, treacly set of ingredients that will come together as this cake. Look at how thick this is and sticky already. Super sticky. Okay, 3 more ingredients. I told you this was a crazy recipe. 3 more ingredients and then we're ready to get it in the pan. When you get this just about fully together, you don't have to do it perfectly, but just about fully together, I have a large egg that has been beaten in 2 tablespoons of milk. Please don't use low-fat milk. What is the point? 2 tablespoons of whole milk, a large egg beaten together, which I'm going to put in here. And then this is the final kick. I told you it wasn't enough ginger. This is instead a 1/4 cup or 35 grams of candied ginger. I should say, in case you're not using volume measurements, that's 30 milliliters of milk or 2 tablespoons. This is 35 grams or a 1/4 cup of candied ginger that has been finely chopped. Thanks, Bruce. Bruce did that job. Now you can finally mix all this together. I find a rubber spatula is the best tool because you do not take out a mixer for any reason. You want this thing to be dense and thick. You do not want to get air into this under any remember how in my deep dig into fudgy brownies, like I'm talking about getting air into it? You do not want to get air into this. You simply want to fold this together until it is a sticky mess. And then you're going to get it in the pan. All right, so now I'm ready to get it in the pan. You want to heat your oven to 300 degrees Fahrenheit or 150 degrees centigrade or gas mark 2. That is a slow oven. Believe me, I tried this at 400 degrees, 350. It poofs too fast. The edges set before the middle sets. So you want 300 degrees Fahrenheit, 150 centigrade or gas mark 2. And a second thing that I can tell you is you want to put a metal baking pan in the rack below where this is going. This is going in the middle of the oven on a rack, and you want to put a baking pan, a metal baking pan, underneath this. Why? Not to catch the drips. The baking pan will create more even resonant heat in the oven, and the oven's temperature will not drop as quickly when the door is open when that heated baking pan is sitting there. True enough. And 2, it will help disperse the heat more evenly so the treacle doesn't have a chance to burn. You'll notice I buttered and then parchmented a 9-inch square or a 22 centimeter pan. Crucial, don't go down to 8 inches or then you will overflow in your oven. And you just need to get this in the pan. Okay, spread it out just a little bit. No worries. 300 degrees, 150 centigrade, gas mark 2, pan underneath the rack, middle rack. This is gonna go 60 to 65 minutes, around in there. It's gonna depend on the moisture content of the oats, of the flour. So 60, 65 minutes, you're looking for a clean toothpick in the center. That's the easiest way to go. Start checking at about the 55-minute mark, even the 50-minute mark. You can tap the edges of the pan lightly. It's hot, but tap it to see if it jiggles. If it jiggles, it's not there yet. And then take it out. After 60, 65 minutes is my guess. Take it out. Put it on a wire rack and let it cool completely to room temperature. That's about an hour to an hour and a half. Do not then turn this out. Lift it out with the parchment paper. Lift the cooled cake out with the parchment. Put it aside. Cut it into squares. However big a square you like. Hey, it's your time on the cross trainer. Cut it into squares. Then put these in a separate container between sheets of parchment paper. Lock that container away and don't touch it for 3, 5, 7, 9 days. It'll get better and better. The bitterness will start to fall out of the treacle just slightly. It'll get slightly sweeter. The oats will soften even more. It'll get stickier as the sugar comes out of suspension in the pieces, and you will have parkin. Wait, I gotta taste it. Okay, that's it. I'm not going to take it out of the oven. I'm not going to show you what it was to do this thing. I'm not going to do all that because I take it out of the oven. I would cool it completely to room temperature. I would cut it into squares. I would put it between sheets of parchment paper. I would cover it and I would set it aside for a minimum of 3 days, preferably a week. It gets better as it sits. Believe me, this thing couldn't dry out even if it tried to. And one of the great things as it sits is it gets stickier. And it gets stickier and stickier. Oh, you probably can't see it, but my fingers are sticky now. Oh my God. I need a cup of good strong tea. I need a cup of coffee. The oats are still present. They're a little crunchy. Crunchy's the wrong word. They're present. I can chew them, but I feel them. They're steel cut oats. Super spicy. It's got that bitter edge from the black treacle. It's sweet. Oh my God. This is utterly irresistible stuff. Okay, I'm going to eat this, but I have to do the out of this episode. So here we go. If you want to know more deep digs into all sorts of dishes, from kimchi to bread and butter pickles to brownies, all kinds of things, check out more on this channel, Cooking with Bruce and Mark. I'm spitting it out as I talk. If you want to see the ingredients to this crazy recipe, they're right below me in the description of this video. Subscribe to this channel. And if you want to hear Bruce and me together doing crazy stuff, check out our podcast, Cooking with Bruce and Mark. It has nothing to do with this YouTube channel. It's mostly us just being incredibly silly and maybe a little dirty about food itself. So check out our podcast wherever you get podcasts from, Cooking with Bruce and Mark. And I promise something that's not as complicated as parkin next time, but I can't promise anything that wouldn't be this good because, oh my God, it's unbelievable.